expel students for sexual violence. But what is the flip side of all of this? We do have a headline from a recent Huffington Post story, Professor, about the University of Iowa making it clear that rapists will be removed from campus. Who is doing this well in terms of preventing and acting on sexual assaults when they happen?
Well, I think it's a good step to say if you are found responsible for rape through a fair process that involves standard due process in the context of a college or university, that the penalty for rape is expulsion. And I think that point does need to be made up front, and so I do think colleges and universities should do that. From a prevention standpoint, there are two universities I would highlight. One is the University of Pennsylvania. My sense is that they're doing a very good job of preventing rape on their campus. We have a chapter of our 1 in 4 organization there that's always been very strong. And the other one, which may come as a surprise to some people, is the United States Naval Academy. They have done a great job of designing multi-tiered educational programs throughout the midshipman's experience there. And so it's not just, well, let's do one educational workshop and call it done, but let's do 4 a year that build on each other every year that they're at the academy. So those are a couple places I would highlight.
Before we go back to calls, I want to talk a little bit more about the Big Ten. And when we did our series a couple of months ago, the president of Indiana University, Michael McRobbie, came on, talked about what IU has been doing this year to respond to violence, sexual violence. Here's a look.
There is nothing more important to us as a university than the welfare of our students. I mean, we are obviously deeply concerned about the welfare of all of our students. So earlier this year, we announced a student welfare initiative, which is a comprehensive approach to problems of sexual violence and the other kinds of issues that you have raised across the institution, that is actually managed and administered at the very highest level in the institution. 2 vice presidents, co-chair and executive council that is actually responsible for both the comprehensive evaluation of our present policies, their improvement, and the implementation of new policies in this area. Now I should add that one of the things we're most proud of on this campus, on the Bloomington campus of Indiana University, is the fact that our students were not just sitting around waiting for the administration to do more to address these issues and so on. Our students a number of years ago, completely of their own initiative, formed an initiative called Cultural Care, which is a student-led initiative that is completely run, managed, initiated by our students, which is focused on students helping students, bystander intervention, bystander awareness, and so on as well. And this is something that I have nothing but praise for.
Professor Foubert, the talk there about bystander awareness. Any thoughts?
Well, I think that the research has shown that if we can convince students to intervene when they see a rape that might occur. For example, there's a party, a woman's walking down a hall with a man, she's tripping over her own feet, looks like they're headed into a private room. That's the time that students, other students need to get up, make sure that the woman gets to a safe place and that the man stays away from her. So I think that's part of it. And I think it is certainly very helpful when students are embracing that message and educating each other about it. One of the things we found in 1 in 4 is that students first need to understand what a rape experience might feel like from a deeply empathetic point of view before they'll be more motivated to intervene as bystanders. And so we've been doing programs on college campuses for over 20 years, and throughout that time, once we found that when you combine a very strong victim empathy component with bystander intervention, that's when we get to behavior change.
Let's go to Manassas, Virginia now. Parent on the line. What's your first name? Hello, Manassas. Are you there?
Oh, hello.
Hi. What's your name?
Hi, this is Celia, and actually I'm from Tacoma Park, Maryland.
Okay, great. Thank you for calling Tacoma Park.
Okay, yes, I would just like to know if the guest could give me a historic perspective on rape on campus in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, so we can put this current discussion into perspective. And I'll take my answer off the air. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear from our guest.
Well, there's not as much written about what happened with rape on campus prior to the 1980s. That's really when the issue of rape on campus, the term date rape, those sorts of things began to be used. Now, before that period of time, what would often happen is there would be different euphemisms used for rape, like he took advantage of me, we had a bad date, I had a bad experience, but there really wasn't even the language at the time for us to discuss acquaintance rape. All the rape that was talked about was that occurred with a perpetrator who was a stranger. So we know little about what happened prior to the 1980s when it comes to rape on college campuses, just because the data, for by and large, just weren't there.
Let's hear from Michael, Farmington, Connecticut. Thank you for waiting, Michael.
Oh, thank you very much. I think you've just answered my question. I'm of the generation that was before the 60s, back in the, I'll be honest, I was born in 1925, went through college, high school and college, and I do not recall the amount of this kind of activity going on but even now, today, it happens in high school. I just wondered, do they have any kind of information on, is there a cultural change in America or what? I guess that's my question.
Thanks, Michael. And Professor Foubert, Dee via Twitter kind of jumps on the same theme there. Have attitudes changed, or are they being talked about more, she asks? If they've changed, what caused the change?
Well, there's attitude change that is associated with different programmatic methods and different educational approaches. So if someone has been educated more about sexual violence in a way that is in consonant with the research, some of those attitudes are likely to change. But most of the public hasn't had good, strong research-based education about sexual violence. Now, did rape occur in the 20s and 30s? Of course it did, absolutely. And my guess is that the rates weren't a whole lot different than they are now. It's just there was even more reticence to report what happened, and less likelihood that a perpetrator would be held accountable. Now today, perpetrator accountability is still embarrassingly low, and we need to do a better job on that. But you know, we can only really confidently discuss that which we have good data about, and the better data started in the 80s.
Where is Congress, the U.S. Congress, on this matter, Professor?
Well, there are a couple senators who I think have been very helpful. Kirsten Gillibrand and Claire McCaskill have begun, and also Senator Blumenthal, have begun to push colleges to address the issue of sexual violence to a much greater degree. The entire Congress passed the most recent amendments to the Violence Against Women Act, often referred to as the Campus Save Act. And there are many helpful provisions that are in there that will require some more educational programming to be available to students and to address different issues in the conduct process. So I think one of the reasons why we're talking about it more is that we have a large group of survivors nationwide who banded together and put pressure on Congress, and then some people in Congress paid attention, and so they're attacking it from a public policy perspective, which largely I find helpful, although I think that some of it could be a little bit more data-driven, but then again, I'm a professor, that's how I think.
Let's hear from Sarah now from Montrose, Colorado. Sarah's a parent. Good morning to you.
Good morning. I'd like to put forth a perspective that I think a lot of people are not considering. And by no means do I wish to blame the victim. These are children, okay? But a lot of times our fashions these days are so greatly exposing every possible portion of a woman's body. And these young girls are just going to the store and picking up the merchandise that's in the stores that everyone seems to be wearing. But I will tell you that if we could get our fashion designers and merchandisers to begin pushing long, flowing skirts and lovely blouses that do not cling to the breast or show cleavage, these girls would begin to be looked at differently by the young boys around them. And they would begin to think differently about themselves as well, just because others were thinking differently about them. And I don't think it would solve all the problem, but I do think it might help to cause people to have more respect. I think that showing every inch of your body is causing people to think that your body is the most important thing about you.
Sarah, we understand the point. Let's get a response from Professor Foubert in Oklahoma City.
Well, whenever I hear someone say, I don't want to blame the victim, but I wait for how they're going to blame a victim. And I think that's not the intent of the caller, but I think that's partly the effect, and that is that, certainly there's so many survivors out there who will second guess every decision that they made, thinking that they were somehow responsible for what happened. But the fact is, rape happens because usually a man decides that he's going to force his will on usually a woman. So I think that's where we need to put a lot of our efforts. Now, I don't think we'll have much success in convincing the fashion industry to do much of anything unless they want to and they think that something will sell. I would take her point to a deeper level, though, and say that the pornography industry is, in my opinion, based on the research, providing men with a recipe for rape and women with messages that they should enjoy it. So I think maybe going to a deeper level of the woman's comments by talking about addressing the pornography industry where there is rampant violence against women that is rewarded in those movies and video clips and such, that's something we really need to address, and I do believe it could have an impact if we did.
We have about 20 minutes left with our guest out in Oklahoma City, and if you're looking to find out a little bit more about what's going on in Congress, we have some details on the Campus Accountability and Safety Act. We touched on it just a couple of minutes ago. In part, it would require colleges to conduct an annual anonymous survey in which students are asked about their experiences with sexual assault on campus. It would require colleges to publish results online so that parents and high school students can make an informed choice when comparing universities. According to the legislation, it would toughen sanctions against colleges that fail to report sexual assault crimes as required by federal law, raising penalties from $35,000 per violation to $150,000. It would also fine students up to 1% of operating budgets if they fail to investigate reports of sexual assault on campuses. That from USA Today. And back to Twitter, to our guest, R.A. Noss asked this question. Can you explain why some universities stop helping victims if they decide to report a rape to the police? Does that happen?
Yes, it does. I mean, I think to take a step back, I mean, usually, well, what is often an approach on college campuses is that they will provide a survivor who comes forward with several different options, which could be hearing the case internally, going externally to the criminal court system or wherever. There's some universities who believe that if it goes to the criminal courts, that they need to wait until the criminal courts make a determination. From my perspective and from the best advice I've gotten, that's a pretty ill-advised way of handling a rape case, because if you have a rape that occurs in a residential community, assuming that it might have happened, whether it's in a fraternity house or a residence hall, the criminal court system takes a long time to hear these cases. And you can provide due process in a university environment where you can hear a case within 60 to 90 days and have an outcome there. And we have to remember, we've talked about Campus Safe, there's also Title IX here. And universities need to provide an environment that's free of a hostile work environment and a hostile educational environment for students on their college campuses. And certainly cases of rape raise the hostile environment standard and meet that. So I think if a university is not hearing a case simply because it's going through the courts, they're making a mistake.
Bill is calling now from Bremerton, Washington. Welcome to the program, Bill.
Welcome. Thank you very much for C-SPAN.
You bet. Bill, can you hear us okay? I think we might have lost Bill. Actually, Bill, if you want to try to get back in, we'll try to put you through as soon as we can. Nebraska's on the air meantime. Pat from Waneta, Nebraska. Are you there?
Thank you. It's Juanita, but I'm calling in response to the lady that called from Colorado that suggested that the way women dress causes the problem. And I'd like to cite the Yawapati tribe in South America. This is a very peaceful tribe, and they wear absolutely no clothing except a band around their waist, and they have no rape at all. And so it's a cultural ailment, in my opinion, in our country. And and that's my comment.
All right, opinion there from Pat. Jim calling now from Fort Knox, Kentucky. Jim's a parent. Hey, Jim.
Yes, I'd like to ask your guest why his numbers are so much different from the DOJ study made from 1995 to 2013, where on page 13 it says 95% of the time the rape and sexual assault rate would fall between 5.0 and 7.2 per 1,000 persons versus the 1 in 4 that your guest quotes.
Professor Foubert.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question very much. There are different ways of measuring the prevalence of rape on college campuses or in society in general. And the statistics that I quote are based on what I believe to be the most methodologically sound studies. They would involve random samples of college students on multiple campuses and that sort of thing. And actually the most recent study with the 1 in 4 statistic did come from the Department of Justice. There's another branch in the Department of Justice, though, that publishes rape reports based on some methods that have come to be questioned over the last couple of decades, particularly because one of the methods that's commonly used in those studies is that they'll call a home line, they'll talk to whoever's on the phone, and they'll say, has anyone in your house experienced theft, armed robbery, rape, those sorts of things? And if the person on the phone doesn't know that someone else in that house has experienced rape because they haven't shared that with them, that's not going to come up in their data set. And so I think that we need to ask people directly what has happened to them. The other thing is that if so many of these rapes happen on college campuses, if you're calling a home line in a residential community, college students are often away at college, and so they're not going to be included in much of that data. So we need to look at who is surveyed, what the questions are, what's the point of the study. And I think our most responsible efforts are informed by nationwide random samples and looking at prevalence in that way.
If you're interested in reading more about the numbers, Glenn Kessler in his fact checker piece today in the Washington Post, it's on page A4, has this write-up and this headline, White House is fighting campus sex assault. But where does it get its statistics? It goes through how the White House goes about finding its own information out. They talk repeatedly about 1 in 5. What do you make of the White House effort, Professor Foubert, in this area, White House, Justice, the administration?
Well, I'm glad that at the very highest levels of our government there's concern about sexual violence. I think, though, that sometimes when you have elected public officials who are trying to address a problem that is very deep-rooted, cultural, and that there are a lot of differing data sources out there, and you may have people writing the reports who are 22, 23 out of college on working for the staff of someone in the White House, they may not have the sophistication to determine the validity of one study or another. And the 1 in 5 statistic that's often quoted is not one that I often quote. It comes from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And in my opinion, rape isn't a disease. And I question whether the U.S. Centers for Disease Control was even able to get a handle on Ebola, let alone rape. And so I think we need to look at Justice Department studies, U.S. Department of Education, studies that are done by scholars. But I do think that it's helpful that the White House is pushing this agenda and putting the weight of the White House behind it. I just wish that in some cases they had a little bit better advice on the data that they could be quoting.
Moving on to Dalton, Ohio now, parent named Mike. Good morning to you, Mike.
Following this real closely, I mean, this show this morning, or I just turned it on, heard you talk about rape on college campuses. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I think several things are conspiring to promote this idea. And one of them, of course, is this hookup culture. I don't know if you talked about that this morning or not. And another thing is, just general immorality, hookup culture, general immorality. Oh, yeah, and speech codes on college campuses. This political correctness.
Mike, as a parent, when you hear that term hookup culture, what does it mean to you? What do you hear?
Well, I don't know, kind of like intense dating, I guess. I don't know. But it's like just general immorality. That falls under the, girls are going along with this hookup culture. And guys seem to be in control. And I don't know if it's a poor image problem or what that women have today, or young women, or easily coerced into just foolishness. They have no moral base. Same with men. I mean, I'm not making a distinction here, but
that being said, as well, we've been talking about the university's approach to all of this, Mike. What should the universities be doing that they're not doing, in your view? Mike, is still there?
you should.
I think we lost Mike. Let's go back to our guest. Oh, you're still here, Mike?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Go ahead. The role of universities.
Well, they got to get away from this thing of speech codes and political correctness, I think, and and they're so out of touch with traditional values. I don't like that phrase, traditional values, but morality, or like the Bible says, just two-word phrase. I'm not sure exactly where it is. I think it's in Corinthians. It says, I'm not sure, but anyway, it says, "Flee fornication." I think really, truthfully, colleges are confusing rape with fornication.
Professor John Foubert, any reaction to what you heard there?
Well, I guess I have a few reactions. The part that I would have some agreement with is that rape absolutely is a moral issue. And when a man makes a decision to rape a woman, that is a morally deficient decision. And there are any number of worldviews that I think could be in agreement with that. I think that there also is what's called a hookup culture on college campuses. And I think, with essentially shared physical activity between two or more individuals of a sexual nature, is that the reason that we have rape on campus? I wouldn't say it's necessarily the reason we have rape on campus, although in the context of a consensual encounter, sometimes that turns into something that is not consensual. And so I think that there are certainly aspects of hookup culture in the United States and worldwide that could be addressed that would help us to decrease the prevalence of rape. So I guess I'd leave it there.
Let's hear some input from the provost at Ohio State University, Joseph Steinmetz. He was on our program during our Big Ten series earlier this year. Talked about what OSU is doing about sexual assaults on campus and violent crimes. OSU is in an urban setting, so let's listen to that and we'll talk to our guest.
Yes, and Greta, this is a very, very, very critical issue on college campuses, and I for one am pleased that this is in the headlines. Here at Ohio State, we spend a lot of time trying to educate our students about sexual assault and I would say violent crimes in general, for a good reason. Ohio State is in an urban setting. There are approximately 1.8 million people that live in the greater Columbus area. So our campus sits right in the middle of this urban area, just a couple of miles from downtown Columbus. And so what comes with this kind of a setting are crimes, crimes just like you'd expect in any large American city. So we have a special duty, I think, and of educating students about violence, and particularly sexual violence. And so we've spent time developing programs and making sure that we're doing a good job in this particular area. In fact, the Office of Civil Rights just released its report about Ohio State and applauded Ohio State for what it's doing. we are moving forward with some criticisms from that report, including streamlining and simplifying the instruction and really making sure that access is all that we can for this information, because it's a critical issue.
And to our guest, Professor Foubert, anything you want to respond to there?
Well, I found it a little odd that he kept saying the word urban and equating that somehow with violent crime. And certainly there is violent crime in some urban areas, but we're talking about the subject of rape. And rape on college campuses happens overwhelmingly among students who know each other, wherever that college campus is located. So, and he also made brief mention to them being applauded by I believe, the Office of Civil Rights for the U.S. Department of Education. You know, to get attention from the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Ed, usually something has gone wrong. And so they would issue a report and they may say, here's some things the university is doing well, here's things that they're not doing well, that they need to change, and if they don't change them, they could lose federal funding. So I don't necessarily think that sounded like something to trumpet to me, and I think that that university and all universities would do well to understand the nature of their campus culture, the culture among their students, and to figure out how to adapt different rape prevention programs to that campus to help address it, and just as important, how to hold perpetrators accountable and to expel them if they've committed rape.
We have a student on the line from Chicago. It's Ron. Welcome to the program, Ron.
Hey, it's good to be here. I've been listening to the show all morning. I feel like not any students at all contributed. I feel like the entire time you guys have been talking about the subject in the sense of victims and being forced into doing something that they didn't want to do. Well, in my experience, you know, I'm a fraternity member, and I'm a single guy. I have a lot of sex with a lot of single women. What I find a lot of times is these girls, they literally go out trying to get as drunk as possible. Look, I'm not blaming any victims. I know you're going to call me out on it, John, but they go out. It's kind of like their fun time. They go out. They try to be as edgy as possible. Like the woman said, they wear provocative clothing. They're out there, and a lot of times they're looking to have sex. A lot of times alcohol is involved. Guess where I take all the girls out on dates? Bars. They get hammered. We go back to my place, and things go from there. Do the next morning? Do they regret it? Do they not? I don't know, man. I'm just saying a lot of times you're focusing too much on the few minority of guys that go out and they target women specifically. They either drug them or whatever the case happens, and they end up having non-consensual sex.
Ron, let me jump in. Which school are you attending out there? Ron, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Which school are you at?
DePaul University.
DePaul. All that being said, you described a scenario when you're going out. What is your role? What do you think your role is in that situation?
Have you ever seen a James Bond movie where he approaches a woman and he says something very suave and he's trying to get her into his bed? I would say it's a very similar goal. Now, I don't think I'm forcing anyone. I'm definitely not coercing them in any unlawful way, but it's kind of the part of the whole dating scene, right? You come out as that guy that they want to sleep with, and you play that role, and they love it, man. They absolutely love it.
Ron, has your school put out any information of substance that you've been able to see that have helped counsel folks, guide folks in this area?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, we had a pretty big deal on campus about some basketball player. You know, God knows what he did, but he was being called out for rape. Look, I don't. The university does what they can, just like every university out there. But I don't think that's really the problem here. I think instead of teaching your daughters, why is it that frat houses are swarmed with these girls that are out there getting as drunk as possible? Why isn't that alcohol safety taught by parents? Why is it just the university's problem?
All right, that was Ron from Chicago. Professor Foubert, reaction?
Well, I have several reactions. One is that, and of course I'll point back to data, if you take a look at fraternity men, they're 3 times more likely to commit sexual violence than are other men on a college campus. And part of that is that they tend to be in cultures where they're supported for, some of them tend to be in cultures where they tend to have support from their peers to act in ways that are violent towards women or that take advantage of them sexually. And I think, the caller mentioned the possibility of a woman being drugged. Well, the number one date rape drug in the United States is alcohol. And one of the things that we know about perpetrators from studying them for many, many years is that they tend to use alcohol to lower a woman's defenses so that she is unable to physically resist the sexual advances of a man. And so I think that caller and certainly many others need to be very careful about their own behavior if they're around women who they wish to have intimate contact with, and if that person is mentally incapacitated or physically helpless based on the effects of alcohol, they need to stay away from that woman. And if they decide that they want to do something at a time when both are sober,